Hello, I'm Marion, and today in Marion's world I'm making a bag. And I'm making a bag that has a firm bottom, an embroidered side and a drawstring top. And it was all inspired by not only my beach finds, which are on the bag, but also the bag that I made for my granddad about 50 years ago. And so that was the starting point. It was supposed to be sashiko practice too, but it all went in another direction because I got taken over by the embroidery muse. And so I hope you'll enjoy seeing what I've put together for you. It almost got made into two videos, an embroidery video and then a bag video, but I've managed to get it together into one. So I hope you enjoy watching, and I'll be waiting here to see what you think about it at the end. These are the supplies that I'm going to use for my new bag. So first off, the main thing is a length of pelmet violin. I've made it 4 inches wide, which is 10 centimetres, 22.5 inches, 57 centimetres. The piece of fabric that I'm going to work on that covers this is actually from a thrifted child's dress. And so I've cut a piece of it off. I've cut this out at 11.5 inches deep by 25 inches of length. The depth is so that your piece of fabric needs to get all the way around and then some. So eventually that is going to be covering that, and I need it to be able to go all the way around. So the rest of the bag, I have picked out this dark blue. So that may be what's going to make the main body of my bag. I'm going to be using my sashiko thread and a sashiko needle. I've got some stuff from the beach. I've also got my other bits of beach combed stuff. This is also my beach found stuff. But that all came like that on the beach, was all together in a big pile. So in my Crazy Quilt rice bag, I keep things like my throaster's waist, my bits of silky stuff, and the other thing I've got to possibly incorporate are these, some beads. So I'm about ready to start stitching. I've loaded a length of sashiko thread in a sashiko needle. It's from these tulip sashiko needles, which say assorted long, and I'm using the longest. I've got my palm thimble on. I still struggle with the correct sort of a way, but the only way to get better is to keep practicing. And so that's partly what I'm doing with this. I've actually drawn around my pelmet violin, leaving about 0.5 centimetre each side, just so I know what I'm stitching, and I'll keep away from the very edges to keep my pattern of my stitching within it. And I haven't ironed my bit of cloth because it's going to be in my hand and it doesn't bother me. I'm just going to give myself a starting line, and I found that the best thing for marking is actually a sliver of soap. And so this is just soap that's worn to a nice edge, and so it makes the most lovely line, and it's not going to be any bother. It wears off as you go, and it's like everybody's got a bit of soap probably. So I'm just going to put myself a line in. I don't really want it to be too complicated, but I maybe go around there a bit. I want it to be a bit beachy because my beach finds are going on it. I'm just going to come up from the bottom, and I'm going to start with a running stitch, and I'm going to try and do it as nicely as I can. Get myself set up for doing some sashiko running stitch, which I'm not overly practiced on, but I'm going to attempt to do it properly. I know I'll end up doing it just like I normally do embroidery, but here we go anyway. And I want my stitches to be quite small, I think. I don't want them to be huge. There we go. Seem to have got into a proper stance. So I'll just tell you the inspiration for this while I'm getting myself started off with my first line. I've been wanting to make something with my beach finds from earlier on in the year for absolutely ages, and of course there's lots of rice bags shapes going around, and I know K3N loves to do the rice bags, and they are lovely. I've done a couple myself. I sort of just didn't want to do that. I wanted to come up with something else, and so it's just been getting mulled over in my head. Well, that's looking perfectly fine, I think. I can remember that I did the tobacco pouch for my granddad about 50 years ago now. That's really weird to actually say, but I can remember it. Maybe I'll do a swell. I think a lot of this is just going to be very free form, which is great. Just sort of keeps your brain working. In fact, if I did a circle there, I could have one of my bits in the middle. I think that would work quite well. I think I'll do that. I'm going to just do that with my soap, so I can see to keep my line. The soap is really good. It's been better than the bloomin' pens. So this should be, when it's finished, a really nice bag that'll stand up. It'll have a drawstring. I already think I know how I'm making all that. And it's a bit different from what I've seen going around. This is going to be dedicated to Grandad's tobacco pouch. I think I'll have to be very careful as it goes around the circle. I don't exactly want to be pulling anything tight at the minute. Right, I'm going to go all the way back along, make some more lines on. But what I've done, because I've got a couple of rows of stitching on now, I've gone ahead and I've just used my soap to do some sweeping lines. I have to say, when I pull the thread through, it's so very satisfying. I'll just pull that through and show you where I'm at. And I'm trying really hard to just pull my fabric. I do not want any gathers at this stage. So what I've got are, I've done just a couple of them. They went off because I found I wasn't keeping the circle, so I've just sent them off. And then I just took my soap and I just sort of did that. Just no more thought than just do some lines, and it's given me something to sort of think about. And so here I have them here too. And whether I fill it all in or not, I'm not sure, but it's giving me something to aim for. Yeah, I am enjoying it, trying to get back into some good practice. So I'm picking it up in my hand, I'm settling the heel of the needle on my palm thimble, and then I'm just trying to not just go into embroidery mode, which is what happens. I end up in embroidery mode. But I would really like to learn new skills, and so that's part and parcel of trying to learn a new skill, is that you're a bit rubbish at the first. I do like it. It's sort of such a different way of stitching. I think it would be more mindful if I wasn't concentrating so much to get it right. Plus I'm also trying my best to put a long enough length on that I'm just leaving I'm starting with a knot here, but I'm just going to leave my ends because I think they're going to be incorporated into the seam when I put this whole thing together. Oh, this is the satisfying bit. It's very nice. So I'll stretch it out. Stretch, stretch, stretch. The soap virtually comes off just with your stitching, but it's there long enough. And I'm going to carry on stitching from left to right, and I'll use these little ends up to do, you know, shorter bits. And I've made a few critical decisions. Firstly, well, I've now got a piece of this waist and my needle, and it was really tough to cut actually, so it's some sort of a nylon thing, but it was really hard for the scissors to get through it, unbelievably. And I'm about to stitch my first piece of that on. But the decisions are that I'm definitely not using the silk. It sort of doesn't go with my beach finds, so I've decided none of that's going on, just the beach finds are. I've managed to actually tear a bit of this stuff, which was really hard to tear, but I've torn a couple of pieces off, and so that's going on, and I've managed to cut a piece of the fishing net. So all of that's definitely going on, and I feel it's going on at the top, so it's sort of maybe either floating or being washed up. But I'm going to see how this stitches first, and I think that's sort of where I'm wanting things to be, I think. What's been nice so far is just putting these lines in, following the bits of soap lines. Anyway, I'm going to put some of this grey on and see how it goes in. But it was picked up off the beach, so it's important to me that it's on here. And then when you pull it, oh, it's so satisfying. It amazes me how much you can stretch it out though. Right, I'll fill a bit more in. I'm going to come back along here. Well, I'm back with another change of plan. As you can see, I've put some more. I've really been, like, I feel I'm in the middle of, I'm just in the middle of it. And when I'm like that, it gives my brain some relief from other things that I might be thinking about. And so I'm just going to go all in for what's happening here now. And what's happening is this might not end up being a practical bag at all. The silk's discarded, the beach finds are on, and my original plan was to use the dark thread here to couch all this down, and to do this invisibly on, and to do this invisibly on. All of a sudden I felt like the sea was trying to sort of go around my beach finds and incorporate them or try and do something with them, and now all of a sudden I just have to go with the sea and it's rubbish really, isn't it? It's sort of, that's nylon, this is a belt off the mine, and so it's totally evolving into something else entirely. And if it ends up being practical, great, and if it doesn't, I don't care at this point. I just need to keep stitching. And so I'm going to fill this piece in here, this little sliver, with some of this thread tangle. And instead of doing it with the grey like I originally was, which has stitched really nice, and I might stitch some more, but I'm going to do it with the white thread, because it's like the sea is trying to incorporate it, or the sea is trying to do something with it, so I have to do it with the white thread. And so I'm going to come up here and just start and just pull some of this tangle out, and then cut it when I can see that I've got something. I think I'll be just doing this at midnight because I'll not want to stop now. I stitch right through this. Things just evolve. I can't really say what else happens. It just evolves, and just the needle has to do what it wants to do. And it takes the thread with it, and then they both take me with it. Look at that, it's just, yep. I'll try and keep my stitches small. So I was really enjoying doing the small stitches, but then it just started to go haywire. I think maybe I'll cut some of the bulk off. Let's have a look. I think I can. I'm going to cut it off. Oh, it's actually quite hard to cut. Look, see, it doesn't cut. These are my good scissors. It's so, I get a different pair. Even the fishing line cut, the fishing net cut easier than this. Blooming stuff, no wonder the sea has problems getting rid of it. I'll go and get something to cut it with. I managed it by getting a knife, like a Stanley knife. I'm going to just smooth them a bit as it goes to the edge of this little piece. And there's my thread. I'm going to try and keep going with the small stitches. I imagine I'll be coming back and forward with it. And my battery ran out and I couldn't be bothered to get up and change it, but I have now. And so I'm taking this further on. I'm using a piece of the grey stuff and I've put some silver beads in my tray. So I'm using the beads as a way of tacking this grey stuff down and at the same time getting the beads, you know, getting all the threads on, but putting beads on at the same time. In fact, my stitches can go any which way because while I'm using the grey, it'll just all add to the tangle. I think that's actually working in my favour. I've got some of this on and it actually sewed without too much bother, and I've used the grey stuff on that so far. But I really want to get some of these bigger pieces on. I think it'll have been part of a bottle maybe. Could be like a, although I don't know. Whatever it is, it's a nice piece of sea glass. And it's going to go in there. And I'm just going to stitch this on. It has to be able to stay on though. It can't just be loose. It has to be practical. I'm still aiming for practical. So let's just see what I can do. I think I feel as if that's there is right. I'll just pull that in. I'm not going to go underneath and come back up the other side because I just feel that will pull my fabric. So I'm going to come up alongside. Go back over. So as long as it's not going to fall off, I'm not going to catch. And if I want to do something a bit more arty, if I want to do something a bit more free form entirely, that's what I'll do with the rest of my beach finds, because they're waiting there, the rusty metal. I knew I couldn't put the rusty metal on this. But that rusty metal's calling me now. What am I going to do? Shall I weave up them? I could do that, couldn't I? I could actually weave up the pieces under and over, under and over, and then I could come back down there. Oh, that's interesting. It's reminding me of the fishing net. Actually, that's very interesting indeed. I'm going to go back there. It's amazing how secure the stones start to feel once you get them laced on. Let's have a look now. Pull this one. That's very interesting. I was worried about the straight lines among all the wavy curves, but actually that's That's not too bad. That needs securing so it doesn't drop sideways. Just take that down and see what happens. Right, that's it. Well, that one's not coming off. That's as secure as can be. It's starting to be something is what it is. Now I have some white beads that can't get this needle up. So I've got my beading needle out, and so I'm going to start and just put some beads here like foam. See what I get going. Just turn it around to see what that's looking like. Okay, yeah, I think so. That's where that's going to go. Quite like incorporating the stones on. It's amazing how easily they can get stitched in. I'll get this one secured, I think, and come back again. Did weaving just like I've done on there to get that tight in, and that can't come off at all. And so I've moved along to this side, and I'd like this green stone here, and the waves are going to be, you know, crashing around it. So I'm going to put the waves on first and then put the little piece of stone in. And I've drawn on with my soap. I've got about 3 curves, but I can see which one I need to follow. Sort it. It's definitely harder to keep your lines going when you're doing one stitch at a time. It's easier to keep the lines when you can load your needle. And I'll come back down. I don't think I want any more white on there, so I'll finish that one off. I'll come back when I've got a bit more done, because otherwise I'll never going to get round to putting the bag together. I'll come back when this stitching's finished, probably, to take it to the next stage. I've got your wide shot of my finished piece of embroidery, which is definitely a combination of sashiko and embroidery and found objects, and I'm absolutely over the moon with it. I've decided to put a piece of blanket as a padding underneath. You could use felt, or it would be just as good with nothing. I wasn't originally intending to. It would just go around there without any padding at all. Cut the blanket a bit wider than the filing so it can give a rounded edge. I've got one piece on, and then I can sort of arrange it all, and I just want that the edges of my stitching here are going to come to the edge, and then that's where I'll sew it all together. So I'm going to clip this all up. I'm not necessarily stretching it, I just want it to look nice over my piece of pelmet filing. I've got this clipped up now, and you could definitely do it with pins instead. Just pin into the filing is no problem at all. So the idea being that I'm now going to turn this over and I'm going to sew this down at the back. I've just got a normal needle and a bit of sewing thread, and I'm just going to hem this piece over. So I've got this really doubled over, and I've used the hem off the child's dress, but if you haven't, you're just going to turn the raw edge over and slip stitch it right the way across. And I would say not necessarily to pull the length of it too tightly, because that definitely could be pulled more in, but the idea is it's going to be going in a circle like that, and so you need a bit of slack in that fabric to be able to go around the curves without it pulling out of shape. And so I'm going to slip stitch mine together, And as I come to the edges, I'm just going to fold everything in nicely. I'm all sewn up now, and although I've pulled it this way, I haven't pulled lengthways at all. So when I turn it over, it's quite wrinkly still, but you'll see why that's good in a minute. So I am really, really happy with the way this has come out. It's just exactly what I was hoping for, I think. So I think that's still going to be quite a practical bag. And I've got wrinkles here, I haven't stretched it out. Now that's partly because I've got a padding of wool blanket inside, and partly because I just haven't stretched it out, because this is going to be turned into a circle, and as I circle it up, that's going to stretch all that spare fabric out, and you'll end up with a nice smooth outside. So don't worry that it's wrinkly when you have it. Don't be stretching the length out, or you'll find it's hard to get a nice smooth shape when you're turning it into a cylinder. So the next part is actually making the bag. First off, I want to have a sturdy bottom to go with this sturdy ring, and so I'm going to put it into a circle like that. I'm just going to pin it. This is eventually going to get ladder stitched together. So I'm just going to pin it together so I can measure for the bottom of my bag. And if I put it on my piece of cardboard, and I've just got 2 pieces of thin cardboard here. Yes. Now as you can see, I haven't quite got a circle here. It just needs to be manipulated into as much of a circle as you can. And I've taken a pencil and I've drawn around the inside. I've just gone and found a saucer that's about the right size, and I'm going to put it over the top. I'm going to draw around that. So that's obviously quite a little bit larger than my wobbly circle, but not by much. So actually all I need to do is go in there and make my circle that little bit smaller, cut it out, and that'll probably be exactly what I need. These are my 2 pieces cut out. Now a way to check whether this is going to be right, and remember I'm going to actually cover this in fabric, is just to keep your circle pinned together, and I'm just going to fit them in and see if there's no point just trying it here. I think this is still a little bit big. I'm just going to push it in and see if I can get that flatly inside. And the answer is not quite, so it needs to be a little bit smaller. I'm just going to cut it a bit smaller. It's not anything, it's something you can easily do to make your own size without actually having to measure anything. And that looks just about perfect to me. That's sitting in there. It makes everything into a nice circle. So that's the size I'm going to go for. So they're both going to get covered in fabric. I've actually covered my pieces of card with a circle of fabric, and I've just done that with a simple running stitch, and I've used the outer fabric because that'll be the outside of the bag, and because I actually don't have enough of my lining fabric, I've covered both of my circles with the same one. I thought in the end this was going to be too dark and I didn't really like it, so I have gone and got 2 other pieces of fabric. I've cut them out already. I have this as a lining fabric, which is left over from my bird quilt, and for the outer I'm using one of Naomi's fabrics that she dyed for me for Christmas, and I'm using a piece of that, and I thought the colours were just very pretty, very sea-like, and when I put my embroidery on top, the colours here are just reminiscent of what I'm using, and I think that's going to make a really nice top of the bag. Those 2 pieces just need to be whatever seam allowance you want. I'm using about a centimetre seam allowance, so they need to be that much wider, and then the height is whatever you want. Mine's 15 inches from the top to the bottom, and that includes the seam allowances. I'm going to do my construction a little bit differently, and I'm going to do mine all by hand, but there's a lot that can be done on the machine to quicken it up if you want. So I've got my 2 bases. The first thing I'm going to do with them is whip stitch them together. I'm just going to go in from the inside of it, put the 2 pieces together, and I'm going to go around with just a small whip stitch, and it's going to take the fold off each piece, and I'm going to go around and do that, and then that's going to make a nice clean edge inside and out. And then after that I'll go on to the construction of the bag. About 7¼ inches across, which is 18½ centimetres. That's my diameter, but that's just pertinent to my bag, I suppose, and you can always check it the way that I showed you. I'm ready to sew my first seam, and that's the lining to the outer bag fabric, and I'm going to sew it along the top edge. This definitely can be just run on the machine, but because I'm doing my bag all by hand, I'm hand sewing it. And I've just started off with a little bit of back stitch here, and as you might be able to notice, I've actually got a drawn line, and I've drawn it about 1 centimetre in, just with pencil. Helps to keep me straight. I'm going to use my sewing ham to anchor my work onto, so I'll just alter the camera a little bit. And so I'm now at the stage where I can pin my sewing onto the sewing ham. I'll pin with the pin angling towards me, and that means as I pull my sewing with a bit of tension, I won't pull the pin out. So I'll just pin into it here, like that. There's room for my hand to be here. I'm left-handed, so I'm sewing with my needle in my left hand. My right hand's going to support my sewing, and I'm just going to do what's called a running back stitch, which just means I'm going to pick up a couple of little running stitches here. I'll actually do 3, push my needle through, and then do a back stitch. The back stitch locks in that stitch and makes it stronger than just a running stitch on its own. And you can see how quick that is to sew. When I come too far out, I move my sewing back, pin in again, and I'm ready. The sewing ham is helping me stitch by holding the fabric so that this can hold it flat and I don't have any slippage. And so, as you can see, it doesn't take very long, and I'm going to do this whole seam first, and then I'll turn it out and press it. I finished my seam, and I've pressed my fabric sort of the right way around, and I've just made sure that my outer bag fabric is just peeking through onto the lining side. I do not want the purple to peek out when my bag's finished. Matched my fabric up beautifully, and I've gone and pressed a hem under the bottom edge too. So I've just gone and pressed up about 3/4 inch or so of both fabrics, and I've pressed them ready because they will be sewn together in the end. But before that, I need to have a hole for my drawstring to go through. I know that one of my holes for my drawstring will come through here, so I'm just going to fold my fabric in half and identify where the other fold is. That's where I need my other hole. And I only need it in my outer fabric. I don't need it into the lining fabric. That's about 2 inches. So I'm going to centre my hole on 2 inches. I'm going to put a pin in there across my 2-inch mark, and I'm going to put a buttonhole in there. I'm going to make my buttonhole a good 1/2 inch wide, because I need to cut the buttonhole first. So I think I'm going to do this with a contrast pearl cotton. Well, I had skipped ahead and realised I'd made a bit of a bother, because I cut through both of my pieces, and actually I shouldn't have cut through the lining. I don't need the buttonhole in the lining. I need the channel for the drawstring to go through. I've got my slit in my fabric and I'm only working on one layer of the fabric. And I want a nice buttonhole. I am going to reinforce the edge just with my sewing cotton. And I'm going to go around with quite big overcast stitches to the depth that I'm going to be sewing my buttonhole. Just helps to keep the cut threads together as you go around with your top stitching. All of a sudden I was thinking, why have I cut through the lining? I can't, yeah. Oh dear. Right, well, if nothing, on this channel you definitely see how to put mistakes right, that's what I think. So I'm going to do my buttonhole in this really nice pearl cotton. And the whole buttonhole versus blanket stitch, it's not something I'm going to go in today, but I'll show you quickly how I'm doing my buttonhole. So buttonhole stitch actually is a knotted stitch. I'm going to come up, I'm going to start right at one end. I'm going to lie my knot in under there. I'll be able to sew over the length and cut it off at the end. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to loop my working thread around in a circle. My circle is going towards the right because I'm left-handed and I'm sewing left to right. So when I've got a circle, I'm going to go down through the opening of the buttonhole, my cut fabric, and I'm going to come up next to the working thread at the width that I want my buttonhole to be stitched. And when I pull through, that's going to make a knot. Just going to put my thumb there to help that come through, and you can see I'm looping a knot, and as the knot gets nearly made, I'm going to pull my thread upwards towards the cut edge so that that knot gets made at the edge of the fabric. I'm going to loop round. I usually use my other thumb to help keep that loop there. So I've got a circle going on. I go down inside the cut edge, come up the depth of my buttonhole. And I'm using these a little bit further apart because obviously I'm using a thick thread. And I pull through, and as the knot gets made, I pull it up towards my cut edge. Down within the circle, through the slit, up the width of the buttonhole. Just support it as you're pulling your thread through. And then pull your knot to the cut edge. And I'm going to do the whole buttonhole now. I've got a completed buttonhole now, and it is just on my single fabric. Next is to identify where that is on the side seam, like that, and mark it. So I've got my buttonhole marked for the other side, and now I can turn this whole thing inside out and I can do the seam, match my seam up here, and then I'm going to hand sew right the way down each side, and I'm going to sew from the seam downwards each way. So I'll sew down there, and then I'll come back to the top and I'll sew down to the bottom, making sure that I have my, where I've pressed up my hem, I keep it like that. And so just more hand sewing or on the machine. My seam is now done, but I've left the opening so that I can match up the buttonhole in the outer edge. And at the end I'll do exactly the same as that one on this one. So now we've got all the components. I can turn this through and give it a shake and get it all lying nicely. Put my bottom edges together. I'm now going to put some pins in halfway. I'll put a pin, and then quarter way as well, which just makes it easier to make sure that you're evenly sewn round. So I'll just fold that again, and I'll put a pin on the quarter points. There's one, and there's another one. And now with that I can quarter this too. So I'll just go across the centre and I'll put a pin at the quarter points on here too. Go either side of my ruler, and then I'll go across the middle again, and that'll be the easiest way to match it all up in the first place. So from that I can now hold this. I'm just going to hold these two edges together because I know that they're level because I've ironed them absolutely level, and I'm going to put my pin through them both and in between the two layers of base, and I'll go around and I'll do every pin as well. So there's my next quarter, just get them nicely level together, and I can put the pin, take that one out, and I'll do that on every pin that I've got here. To make it easy to sew, I'm going to go in the middles of those areas as well. So I'm just going to hold my two pieces together, and I'm going to pull it out to the outer rim, put another pin, and you'll see there's a bit of slack around. That's fine, that just gets eased in. So I'm going to get another pin, and I'm going to do all of the middle bits. Make sure I go through both the lining and the outer bag. And now I just need to slip stitch that on, and I'm going to ease in the little bit of extra fabric as I go. So I'll bury my knot in between. So here I go, I'm going to go through my outer, through my inner, and slip onto the outer edge and pull through my outer, through my inner, and slip onto the outer edge. This will all be covered up by the embroidered part, so it's just important that it all goes on nice and neatly and securely. So you don't want to be doing stitches that are too huge, and also just ease these little pieces in as you go. So outer, inner, and then the edge of the base. And I'm going to go all the way around and take my pins out as I go. It's important that the side sits inwards, so when I'm looking from the base I can't actually see the side. I'm not pulling it down onto here, it's actually getting sewn on the inside, which is why you've got that bit to ease in. It's all starting to come together now. My bag is totally sewn onto the base, and you can see it's not on the outside edge, it's just within the base. And what I've also done is finished both of the buttonholes now, and I've made my channels with the same colour of the pearl cotton, and I've just gone with a running stitch because I wanted it to be a bit decorative, but that's another thing that you could do on the machine if you wanted to. And to keep those straight, I just actually used my seam gauge, and I just kept sewing, kept holding it on and sewing. You could just as easily use a ruler. And so I've done about 1.5 inches and then 2.5 inches to make my channel. And then it was the drawstring. So I've gone and made some twine, and I do have a tutorial for how I make my twine because I use my sewing ham to help do it. This time I've actually made it out of some jersey fabric. So I make my clothes, I quite often have jersey left over. This was left over from making pyjamas. You quite often have long strips. If you pull them, so this is bamboo jersey, cotton jersey, any jersey will work, but I usually have cotton or bamboo. If you pull them, the raw edges go inwards and you get quite a nice strip. And so all I've done is I've used my jersey strips to make a twine that's all one colour. And the thing is, it's actually stretchy, which is sometimes, that's quite nice. You can make a stretchy drawstring. And so I've made 2 pieces, and I'm going to thread them through the top. One from one end all the way around and one from the other all the way around. And then I'm ready for the final piece, which is putting my outer on. I'm nearly there. The drawstring's in. The colours have gone really well. Pulls up nicely. I'm really happy with that. And so now we're on the final go really. So the first thing is to get this into a circle. I've got my normal sewing cotton back in my needle, and I'm going to match these edges up, and I'm going to slip stitch them or ladder stitch them together. I can't actually believe my pattern. That is by pure accident that it's almost matched up. I'm quite amazed. So I'm going to bury my knot into there. I want this to be strong, so I'll probably ladder stitch up one way and then back down the other. I'm going to hold these together, and I'm going to put a securing stitch in across first. Don't want any of this piece showing. That'll be on the inside. And then I'm ready to ladder stitch. And ladder stitch is just, and I know I'm on a colour that's not going to be so noticeable, but I'm taking about 1/8 of an inch on one side, coming straight across and taking 1/8 of an inch, or maybe 1/4 of an inch on the other side. A small stitch anyway, and I'm not necessarily pulling them up straight away. I'm just going to go back across one side, then the other side, matching them up. And then every so often I'll pull this together, and the stitches will disappear into the fabric. I'll pull it up and you can see those stitches disappear. So I'm going to go right up to the top of this and do the whole thing. My seam's closed. I've done it a little bit down inside as well, but I'm really pleased with that. If I'd planned that, I'd have been happy, but I didn't plan it, and maybe I should have. That's sort of the back of your bag, but you can decide where is the front. Well, that is definitely going to be the back of my bag, and you just need to make sure that your side bits that you're going to pull are going to be at the side. There's no point starting one of your seams there and then having your pieces pull at the front. So make sure that you orient your little embroidered ring, and then the bag goes in sideways. So I've got my sideways, I've got my bag facing frontways, and I'm going to push my ring, my base, down into it, into there. I'm going to push it all down just for the moment. Once the bag's pushed in, can do exactly what happened with the bag to the base, is I'm going to put some pins, and I'm going to press my base out until it's just exactly where I want it to sit, and I'm going to put a pin in between the top and bottom, and I'm going to go around and press the base out. It's easier to come from the outside, from the inside out all the time. And I'm going to put the pins in right into the middle and go all the way around, pressing your base down, pinning in. And now I'm going to go around there and I'm going to slip stitch that whole base in. There we go. And now I'm ready. I'm just going to press everything in, and I'm going to take small little stitches, and to get them the strongest and the neatest, I'm going to go straight across from where my thread's coming out. Make sure I'm in camera. So straight across from where my threads come out, a light there so you can see it, and go into the side. I'm going to slip along underneath the fabric and come back out on the edge of the base. And that's how I'm going to get the whole base slip stitched on. And remember, the bag itself is already attached to the base, so all we're doing is attaching this to everything else. Taking your pins out as you go. And it should be an easy sew because you've got a nice padded side and then the base has got cardboard in the bottom, and you'll be able to just feel to pick up the very edge of the folded piece that's going over the cardboard. The base is on and it's all slip stitched in really neatly. It looks really nice going around there. And so one more slip stitch seam to do, and that's to get the bag attached to the top of the embroidered padded piece. And so I've gone round and I've pinned in again, and the most important thing here is to make sure that you pull your bag upwards nice and flat with your hand on the inside, and so you don't twist it at all. So the bag needs to come from the bottom. Remember, it's all sewn in there now, there's nothing to pull up. It's all attached to the base from the inside and the outside now, and so you just need to pull straight up and then put a pin in to keep it all nice and square. So I'm going to put a pin in there, and there may be places where you have to ease in a little bit because there may be more fabric here than there is there, but just by a little bit, just like the base was. Just going to put that in there like that and hold my bag, and I'm going to start, and I'm slip stitching the whole way around, and that will be the final thing because the drawstring's done. The final step is just to slip stitch this together, and it should be a quick go around really. It's a little awkward possibly, just pull it in as it goes, and it's just the same thing, straight down onto the bag and slip along. You don't have to make these too tiny actually. They can be a bit bigger. They're not holding anything other than the bag to the top. They're not sort of have to be strong or anything like that. Well, here it is finished, and it's looking really lovely. The shape of it has come out exactly how I remember the one I made Grandad's. His didn't have embroidery on, and it didn't have a lining in, so I had to just think a bit how I was making the construction, but I'm really pleased with it. It stands up lovely, it's got the nice solid base, so that in itself, and in fact that could make a lovely basket just in itself, and I might make something like that just as a little basket. But it's got the bag attached with Naomi's beautiful fabric and the jersey string to put it tight. Is that good capacity? I think that's worthy of anybody's table or anybody's shelf. My beach find, half sashiko, half embroidered drawstring bag. I hope you enjoyed watching that tutorial for this bag, and I have to say that I got taken over by the embroidery on it, and I just had to go with, I don't know, just whatever was happening was just happening, and I had to just do what came to my head at the time, and I absolutely love it. And Naomi's beautifully hand-dyed fabric is looking gorgeous. They were just the perfect colours to use. So all in all, that's a really nice way of making a solid bottomed drawstring bag that's got, well, I'm going to say that's got art in it. Never mind a bit of sashiko, which it was supposed to be. It was supposed to be sashiko, but it turned into something else. Anyway, I'm going to leave that there and say thank you for watching, and I hope if you've enjoyed that and you haven't been to my channel before, that it might make you press the like button and press the subscribe as well. So my little channel is growing really nicely at the moment, so I'm just trying to keep that going, and I've got lots of other tutorials and other bits of stitching and whatnot coming up. I think I'll be sewing on the machine next week. I think I'm going to be at long last getting into altering those thrifted clothes. With that, I'll just say thanks for watching, thanks for visiting me at Marion's World. I hope you feel inspired to do your own firm bottomed embroidered drawstring bag with whatever supplies you've got. I haven't gone out and bought anything for this. Everything was already here, and so you can do that too. Bye everyone, and I'll see you next time when you next come and visit me. Bye for now.